Hey guys, just jumping in quickly here. We're up to episode 8. It seems to be going really great. We're having a great time and we've received some really good feedback so far. And we've got a rough idea of how many plays and downloads we're getting per episode. And it's
more than we thought.
That's right, mostly in Australia, a few in America, but some really random countries like Spain and Slovakia. So thank you to anybody that's listening overseas that we don't personally know.
And because we don't personally know you, we want to know you. So go onto our Facebook and leave a message on our wall or send us an email, idiofacto@gmail.com, or send us an Instagram photo or something. Do something. Get in contact. We want to know who you are.
That's right. Reach out. Let us know what episodes you've liked, maybe what episodes you haven't quite understood. Let us know something that you'd like to hear in the future. We'd really love to hear from you, and we hope that by interacting with you guys, we can make the IdioFacto community greater and more successful.
Now for this week's show. Join us on an investigative journey as we educate each other on a scientific discovery, concept, or phenomenon.
Then we'll take a dive into the complicated and misleading world of pseudoscience to sort the factual from the fabricated.
I'm Matt McCabe.
And I'm Levi Bateman.
And this is IdioFacto.
So, do you remember the Y2K or Millennium Bug?
Yes. Well, vaguely. I was, 10 at the time, so...
Yeah, right. I thought you would have been a lot older than that in the year 2000.
Oh, God. Gets funnier every week.
I was 8, but I remember it. It was a big deal. Everyone was freaking out, buying water and thinking that their computers were going to crash. And
did you say buying water?
Yeah, bottled water, thinking that...
Oh, like stocking up on supplies.
Yeah, stocking up on supplies, filling their cupboards, filling their freezers and...
Non-perishables.
Buying astronaut food. Well, as of today, the day of recording, the 7th of April, or as it was, the 6th of April in the US earlier today, the GPS world is actually experiencing its very own Y2K, or Millennium Bug.
How so?
All of the atomic clocks in GPS satellites are basically resetting back to zero. And this is thought to cause issues with older GPS devices that aren't designed to deal with this clock reset, because it means that the device's time is 19 years different to the satellite time.
Yes, I can see why that would cause some issues.
So basically what's happening is the time on the GPS clock uses 10-bit code to tell weeks of time. That's how they sort of work, is in weeks. And basically because of the way that it stores this data, there's only a certain number of combinations of bits that are possible. So the clock has to reset every 1,024 weeks.
1,024 is the highest 10-bit number you can make, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Well, GPS satellite clocks first started on the 5th of January 1980. So the first clock reset was in 1999. And the 6th of April, which was yesterday, was exactly 1,024 weeks after 1999. So this marks the start of the third GPS time epoch.
It's a bit shorter than geological time, though.
A little bit, yeah. 19 years is not really an epoch, but we got to give the GPS world something.
Sure.
They don't have much else. Yeah. So why is time so important to the GPS system? So let's find our way in the complex domain of GPS navigation.
Oh, it's too early to be starting those yet.
You like that?
Come on. No, it's tenuous.
Might as well get it out of the way.
Well, as if that's going to be your last.
Hey, don't spoil it.
Okay.
All right. Well, GPS, or Global Positioning System, was first established in 1973, would you believe it, by the US Department of Defense.
That is early.
Sidebar, in Australia we spelled defense with a C. In America, defense is spelled with an S.
Really?
Isn't that wild? Yeah.
That's quite weird.
When this system was launched, it was called Navstar GPS, which is such a military name. It was allowed for civilian use in the 1980s, and the full functionality of the system was completed in 1995. The US government actually implemented this program called Selective Availability, in which the GPS was degraded for members of the public, and only the military could access its full potential of GPS accuracy. I guess the military were threatened by civilians that had location services that were as good as what they had. They got a little bit scared, but the system was discontinued in the year 2000 when Bill Clinton signed a bill, and the US essentially have no intentions of using selective availability. Although they could, I guess. They do own the system. Currently, there are also Russian, Indian, Chinese, and European equivalents to the GPS system, but the Indian and Chinese systems only orbit over India and China. So they only orbit over there, the countries that own them. So no one else can use them, which is really selfish. So GPS actually replaced other navigation systems. So shortly after Sputnik was launched, which was quite a famous Soviet Union satellite, which was the metal sphere with the 4 prongs that came off the back of it. There were 2 American physicists that realized that they could use the Doppler effect to track the satellite's position. We had to use a very old, very slow, rudimentary computer and some pretty heavy calculations to do it, but they could do it. And this kind of sparked the development of the first satellite-based system, which was called Transit. Essentially, it kind of worked the same as what the current GPS setup works. It used 5 satellites, and it could deliver relatively accurate location data, but only once per hour. But that wasn't too bad, considering it was developed in 1960. So shortly after that, the ground-based Omega system was used. I don't know if you've heard about this, but there was an Omega tower just around the corner of where you actually live, Matt. There was an Omega tower in Wood End.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why there?
I don't know. I guess there was 8 to 10 of these towers around the world, and I guess Wood End was just chosen as a good location that offered good triangulation.
Right.
So this was used during the 70s. Just like I said, it used these huge big radio towers, and it used phase comparison to give a location. There'll be an episode on phase comparison, so I'll save it till then.
All right, good. Well, I'll just keep all my knowledge to myself then.
Anyway, the Omega system was used up until the 1990s, but it was phased out because of the improved accuracy and the availability of GPS. Basically, GPS consists of 31 satellites, each of which orbits the Earth once every 11 hours and 58 minutes. So they're all in this medium Earth orbit. And you've covered space lifts. You'd know what medium Earth orbit is.
Not the exact number. I know it's...
Come on.
It's further away, isn't it, than geostationary orbit?
It is approximately 20,200 kilometres.
So it is further away.
Altitude. Yeah.
It's 15,796 or something is the geostationary orbit. So
yeah.
I remember that one, but whatever. You know what? You could always just go back and listen to the episode of IdioFacto if you're really unsure.
You didn't quite remember it though, really. 15,000 and something.
Look, I could go back to my... Shut up.
Anyway, from this altitude, from any point on the Earth's surface, you should be able to see between 6 and 9 of these GPS satellites.
At any one time?
At any one time.
Oh, wow, okay.
A minimum of 4 satellites are required to get an accurate location lock.
How come it's 4 and not 3? So, like, with 3, you should be able to triangulate your position, should you not? Or is it because you're trying to triangulate your position in 3 dimensions rather than 2?
Yeah, you would be able to with triangulation. However, this uses trilateration.
Right.
The GPS system uses trilateration because you also have to take altitude into account.
Yes, okay.
Because you're not just on the surface of the Earth, you could be anywhere above sea level.
Yeah. So for triangulation, that's used to put you in a location on a map, right? So like a flat surface, effectively a flat surface. Whereas with GPS, you're using trilateration, and so you have to incorporate the 3rd dimension of altitude as well.
That's right. I'll get into how that works.
Okay.
But it is quite complicated, and there's an incredible amount of maths and physics involved in it.
I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. So the line of sight is important in the GPS world because the GPS satellites use a relatively weak radio wave that can be blocked by trees or the roof of your car or the landscape can block it out. So the GPS device needs to actually be able to see, if you will, the sky and a decent portion of the sky. So each of these satellites has got a very accurate atomic clock, and I shotgun doing the episode on atomic clocks because they are quite fascinating.
You can have that. That is all yours.
Cool. So each of these atomic clocks in the satellites are all synchronized with one another, and GPS satellites are constantly transmitting data to the Earth that your phone or your GPS device receives. The satellites do not receive data from your phone. It's only one way. This is a pretty common misconception. The satellite and your phone are not talking to each other. Your phone or your GPS receiver is only receiving GPS signal from the satellites. It's a one-way system. So when satellites transmit data, they send out this incredibly accurate timestamp because of the atomic clock that they've got on board. What they also transmit is their known position over the Earth's surface. And because the satellite has a constant velocity and trajectory, they pretty well know where they are at all times.
Well, they don't pretty well know. They absolutely know.
They know exactly where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Except for very small errors, which are a big deal in the GPS world, as you'll find out. Basically, your device receives this timestamp and then it compares the time in that message to the time within itself. So because the signal travels at the speed of light, there's a slight delay between when the signal is transmitted from the satellite and when it's received in your device. So your GPS receiver uses this time difference to calculate, and I'm not going to go into the maths because I'm not going to bore you. I totally know how all this maths works.
Yeah.
I'm really clever with all of this complex GPS satellite maths, but it's boring, so I'm not going to go into it. But basically, your GPS receiver uses this time difference to calculate how far away the satellite is. So the closer the satellite is, the less difference in time there will be. And then the further away it is, the more difference in time there will be. So you can use this time difference to work out how far away the satellite is from your device. So once you have this timestamp sent out by the GPS satellite, you can essentially draw, I'm putting draw in inverted commas because it's not actually drawn anywhere, but you can draw spheres around the satellite, and you could be anywhere on the outside of that sphere. Are you with me?
Yes. It's not around the satellite. It's a distance away from the satellite, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. So essentially there's a time difference sphere around the outside of this satellite.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, so you can draw these spheres, and because of the time difference, therefore the physical distance, you could be anywhere that is that distance.
Yeah.
You could be anywhere that distance from the satellite.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really tell you where you are on the Earth.
No.
That just tells you how far away you are from the satellite.
Yeah.
So using multiple satellites, wherever the outside of these spheres touch, because each of these satellites is transmitting a timestamp and the location. So your phone is receiving, or your GPS device is receiving multiple signals from multiple satellites, and then it's doing some maths to compare each of them. So where the outside of the sphere touches, that is where you could be. Mm-hmm. So one satellite, if you can see one satellite, it's essentially useless.
Yeah.
Because it means you could be
anywhere in the
exactly
sphere.
where you're on Earth, but it also means you could be way out into space.
But you couldn't be anywhere on Earth. You could just be anywhere that the sphere could put you. So this sphere around the satellite is huge then. It extends all the way to the surface of the Earth at least, right?
Yeah, it does.
Because it has to. So then you could be anywhere within that sphere on Earth. Obviously you're on Earth, so it can probably assume that you're somewhere on Earth, but that in that sphere could be hundreds of kilometres. Depending on...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It'd be a circular point on the Earth's surface.
Yeah.
It'd be a circular ring on the Earth's surface, and you could be anywhere within that. But you could also be, because altitude is considered as well, you could be anywhere in any difference from that satellite.
Yeah.
As long as the distance is the same as what's being calculated by the time difference in these atomic clocks.
Yep.
So one satellite is entirely useless. 2 satellites obviously narrows it down, but to get a true accuracy, you need 4 satellites. And obviously the more that you can see, the more accurate your location will be. Mm-hmm. And as I said, this uses trilateration and not triangulation. So this seems like a pretty good system. We've been doing it for a long time. We know how it works. Why are there still errors? Why do our GPS devices still sometimes put us kilometres away from where we actually are? So basically, there's a few things that can go wrong with a GPS. Well, there's more than a few, there's a lot, but the more common ones are... So there's the ionosphere, which is part of the Earth's atmosphere, which is 60 kilometres to 2,000 kilometres above the Earth's surface. So within this ionosphere, there's all these free electrons, and there's so many so that it can actually affect the transmission of this GPS signal. So that's a possible source for error, and the error is greater when... the GPS satellite is closer to the horizon than when it's directly above you. When it's directly above you, the signal goes directly through the ionosphere, whereas when it's at the horizon, because it's at an angle, it has to pass through the ionosphere for a lot longer distance. Another possible issue with GPS is that time and exact time is so critical A 1 nanosecond time variation in the satellite can lead to a 1 foot difference in location on the Earth's surface. So to give you an idea of how small a nanosecond is, there are 1 billion nanoseconds in a second. And there are 1,000 nanoseconds in a millisecond. So you think of how quickly a millisecond goes. There are 1,000 nanoseconds within that. And if the clocks are just 1 nanosecond different, there will be a 1 foot difference on the Earth's surface.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. So that these clocks have to be so perfectly synchronized. Here's a weird one. And I think there'll also be an episode on this. We'll bluff our way through it. It's got to do with the theory of relativity. So atomic clocks tick slightly slower than clocks on Earth because they're moving faster. And the faster that you get to the speed of light, the slower time goes, which is wild. So this actually accounts for a 7 microsecond delay per day, just because the clocks on the satellites are moving so much faster than the clocks on the ground. So a microsecond, it's also not quite as abrupt as a nanosecond, but there are still 1 million microseconds per second.
Right.
So another thing that can affect GPS clocks is general relativity. Essentially, what this rule says is that clocks that are closer to a massive object, such as Earth, will tick slower than objects that are further away. So what this general relativity accounts for is a 45 microsecond difference ahead. So the satellite clocks are 45 microseconds faster because they're further away from Earth, and therefore the atomic clocks can tick faster. So what this leads to is a 38 microsecond delay per day between clocks on Earth and clocks in the GPS satellites. This doesn't sound like very much, but what it translates to is a 10 kilometre error per day.
Wow.
Which would render GPS satellites absolutely useless from the get-go if this wasn't taken into consideration. Someone actually knew that this was going to happen.
That's clever. How did they know that? Did we do like science and stuff?
They spoke to me and I told them.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense.
The advice that I gave was, to account for this, the clock's frequencies have been slowed down from 10.23 megahertz to 10.2299999543 megahertz. So they've been slowed down ever so slightly to account for...
That's crazy.
General relativity and relativity with the atomic clocks ticking faster and slower and all sorts of complicated business. Basically, this answers the question from the start of the episode. Why does time have such an effect on GPS system? So you think back to when I was telling you about the clock resetting back to 0, that means a 19-year difference. So we now know that even a 1 nanosecond difference translates to such a huge error. 19 years is unusable. Mm-hmm. Absolutely unusable. The belief is that it's only going to affect older devices that weren't designed to deal with this. Yeah. Newer devices, it would be programmed into the software.
So it's only about the interpretation, really, isn't it, of the software? It's not a hardware problem, it's a software problem.
Exactly. That's right. Newer devices should be synchronized with the satellite atomic clocks, or they should revert back to 0 at exactly the same time.
So similar to Y2K, we implemented strategies early on because we saw the problem coming and averted potential disaster.
Yeah, exactly right.
It's almost like science is a predictive and helpful thing to do.
Yay, science.
Yeah.
So what uses does GPS have? I could think of a couple.
1 or 2.
Pretty much everybody with a smartphone uses their GPS just about daily. A lot of smart watches are starting to use GPS. Cameras with geotagging capabilities. You can get GPS tracking dongles, small devices that you stick onto cars, so if they get stolen, you can track your car. GPS can also be used to synchronize clocks, and some laboratories that need very high accuracy time have a GPS antenna on the roof that receive constant time updates from passing GPS satellites.
That's pretty cool.
So the GPS in your phone has an accuracy, depending on your phone and where you are, of about 5 meters, sort of between 2 to 5 meters. I've actually used a GPS at work that has an accuracy down to 50 to 100 centimeters.
Whoa.
And actually Yeah, it actually gets better than that, down to about 7 centimeters with a system called post-processing, which is incredible, seeing as though the device is wider than 7 centimeters wide.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so highly accurate. Used for working at the position very accurately of, say, underground gas pipelines or phone lines. So the next time you use maps on your phone, or you plug in a direction into your car's GPS system, just have a quick think about the incredible amount of maths and physics that has gone into allowing this system.
And thank the scientists who made it for putting it in the software and not making you do it yourself.
So I managed to guide you through GPS and how that works.
Oh, another tenuous one. Guide? Really?
It's totally unintentional.
Was it?
Nah, who am I kidding?
Oh my god. You had me. Alright. Well, in April last year, so wait, this time last year, how about that? I was in Airlie Beach for a friend's wedding. Shout out to Wayne and Beck. Congratulations.
Hey, Wayne and Beck.
Again. I was staying in a beach house and we walked down to the main Airlie Beach area and there was a market on for a cruise ship that was anchored just offshore. And there was a stand there where a lady was selling homebrewed kombucha.
Ooh, yummy.
And so I stood behind Wayne while he got basically a lecture from this lady on how good kombucha is for you. And she gave him a flyer and she explained how kombucha can prevent and or treat cancer.
What?
It can help with relaxation. It can help with asthma. She listed off about 15 different things that it could cure or treat or prevent. And I was like, I don't know about that.
Hang on, stop the podcast, stop the recording. I'm gonna take this information and go down to my local GP because they don't know that. I went to a GP not long ago and they didn't tell me about kombucha. Maybe they don't know about it.
Maybe they don't know about it. That is a good... Or I guess the alternative is that maybe it doesn't actually have those properties. But...
Well, I guess you're about to tell us.
I thought I'd better look into it anyway. And also,
All right.
We actually got an email from Sarah Madison who asked us to cover kombucha, as she, quote...
Shout out to Sarah.
...used to have the displeasure of sharing a kitchen with someone that was growing... steeping, fermenting, and she wasn't very happy about it. It's actually called brewing, Sarah, and we're going to tell you about it. Kombucha, the etymology is uncertain. Kombucha in Japanese means kelp tea. It refers to a type of tea that is made with a type of seaweed. So not really related, but it's probably a misappropriation of the Japanese term by English speakers.
It's basically what kombucha tastes like, though, if you haven't tried it. Imagine going to the beach, scooping up some kelp, mushing it up in water, and then drinking that water.
Well, I gotta be honest, when I read the description, I haven't actually tried it, but when I read the description of it, that's kind of the impression that I got as well. Kombucha is actually the symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, and that acronym is SCOBY. So everyone just calls it a kombucha SCOBY, but the kombucha refers to that SCOBY itself, and that could be various species of bacteria or yeast, but it's a symbiotic culture. So they live together and are symbiotic. So they have a relationship where it's beneficial for both of the organisms.
Actually beneficial, though, not claimed beneficial.
No, actually beneficial because they biologically live together.
And this SCOBY, physically, it looks like a great big sloppy mushroom, doesn't it?
It's funny that you say that because it's commonly called a tea fungus, even though it's not a fungus. As you would have heard last week in our Biological Kingdoms episode, bacteria is its own kingdom and yeast is fungi, but the whole thing is called a tea fungus. But the actual tea that you drink is called kombucha tea, which is when you take green or black tea and you ferment it using this SCOBY, ferment it like you would a beer, and you produce kombucha tea.
So is it alcoholic because it's fermented?
It is alcoholic, and it can be anywhere from less than 0.5% to up to 3% alcoholic.
You'd actually have to be careful about that. 3%, it's not huge, but that's a decent amount of alcohol if you drank a lot of kombucha.
Yeah, correct, yeah. And if you homebrew kombucha, you can over-ferment as well, and you'll end up with a kombucha that's too high or much higher in alcohol content than you would have thought it was. 3% is comparable to some beers.
That's right, yeah, light beer.
Yeah. Most commercially brewed kombucha is less than 0.5%, so they can sell it as non-alcoholic. Kombucha is said to contain probiotics, which is bacteria that promote gut health, and it's claimed to be able to treat AIDS, cancer, constipation, diabetes, arthritis, anorexia, any number of various conditions, some related to digestion, some not at all.
I like these huge claims and they're falsifiable. Bring on the science, I say.
Well, your mate, Dr. Axe, has an article on his website about how good kombucha is.
I bet he does.
At one point, he lists the type of cultures that make up this health elixir. They're his words, not mine. Gluconoacetobacter make up greater than 85% of the cultures in most samples, and Zycosaccharomyces make up more than 95% in most samples. So I'm not a mathematician, but I'm pretty sure that adds up to 170%. So 170% of all kombucha cultures.
Checks out Dr. Axe.
Anyway, so I kind of ignored Dr. Axe then after none of his evidence made any sense. And I found a website called Healthline. And Healthline have an article devoted to kombucha, and it is titled 8 Evidence-Based Health Benefits of Kombucha Tea.
Evidence-based?
Evidence-based. I read that and I was like, I would like to take this evidence and examine it and see what it comes up with. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take us through these 8 health benefits one by one, and we'll see whether kombucha tea actually does what it says it'll do.
Excellent.
Number 1, kombucha is a potential source of probiotics. So the author says that a large amount of bacteria also grow in the mixture, as well as whatever it is that is in the SCOBY. So he says it contains several species of lactic acid bacteria, which may have a probiotic function. For this reason, adding beverages like kombucha to your diet might improve your health in many ways.
Might, potential.
He lists some articles there that basically they just list a bunch of probiotic bacteria that can help with various gastrointestinal problems. So unless you have a disease or a gut issue that suppresses your gut flora, a varied and otherwise healthy diet will provide sufficient probiotic activity anyway.
Okay.
You're unlikely to receive more of a benefit from kombucha than other foods containing probiotics, like yogurt, for example. And the evidence for probiotics for general gut health is varied. So if you just take a probiotic supplement, there's varied evidence as to whether that's actually helpful. A 2013 systematic review in the Journal of Alimentary Pharmacology and Therapeutics found that there are specific probiotics that can be used to treat specific gastrointestinal issues, but there's no catch-all general health promoting probiotic.
Right, I guess it's a bit like an antibiotic. Not all antibiotics work for all infections.
That's correct. It's a similar thing. Basically, this article says this provides some help to doctors to prescribe different probiotics to different gut problems. So the probiotics that are available in kombucha will depend entirely on the SCOBY that's used, because the species of bacteria and yeast can vary, and they're unlikely to solve specific problems if they're not the right kind of gut bacteria.
Right.
Well, kombucha is a potential source of probiotics, but there's no evidence to say that that will be helpful to you.
Okay.
Reason number 2, kombucha may provide the benefits of green tea. So the author confidently states that green tea is one of the healthiest beverages on the planet. And he says exactly that. Green tea is one of the healthiest beverages on the planet. Doesn't provide a source for that, but anyway. He says because it has antioxidants and tea polyphenols.
There's probably going to be an episode on antioxidants.
Yes, I was just about to say, we're going to kind of leave antioxidants to the side for now, but there is some evidence that tea polyphenols may have a small but statistically non-significant health benefit.
Okay.
So there were 3 Cochrane Library Review papers from 2009, 2012 and 2013 that found that there is no significant benefit of green tea on weight loss, cancer or cardiovascular disease. Those are the 3 Cochrane Library Review papers. That's all that they have on green tea. But as we've said before, our friends, the Cochrane Library, do really good meta-analyses and systematic reviews. And even if they did find benefits of green tea, that's not evidence for the benefits of kombucha. That's the evidence for green tea. So in order to get those benefits, you'd have to have kombucha that's brewed with green tea.
That's right, which it can be, though, I guess.
It is often brewed with green tea, but there's no direct evidence for kombucha. There's also no real evidence to say that green tea is the healthiest beverages on the planet. There's also no real evidence that green tea does anything really at all.
Yeah.
So strike that one off the list as well.
We'll put that to the side.
Number 3, kombucha contains antioxidants. I am going to let Levi take you through the pseudoscience behind antioxidants 1 week in the near future. So we'll put that aside. He basically says antioxidants are substances that fight free radicals, which are reactive molecules that can damage your cells. Ooh, that's, yep. We'll go into that. It requires its own IdioFacto to itself. I think it's pretty full on. But the author also suggests that in rat studies, kombucha can reduce liver toxicity. Now, we've talked about rat studies before. Rats are physiologically different to humans, and we are not able to draw any conclusions from rat studies without then human studies that follow those, that show the same effect.
Exactly. Our bodies work totally different. Just because a study works in one organism does not necessarily mean that it works in humans, and quite often it means that it doesn't work in humans.
True. So in rat studies, kombucha can reduce liver toxicity. So how many human studies do you think exist on the effectiveness of kombucha on liver toxicity?
I'm hoping there's a couple.
None, not one.
Oh.
The fact that there's rat studies that say that kombucha reduces liver toxicity is not evidence at all for health benefits of kombucha in humans.
But you can't prove that it doesn't.
All right, well, we're not going through the argument for falsifiability again. We've done that 3 times in the last 3 weeks. Let's do something a bit different.
Right.
Reason number 4, kombucha can kill bacteria. The author asserts that kombucha contains acetic acid, which can suppress the growth of some bacteria and yeasts. So that's not unusual. Many bacteria have trouble growing in acidic conditions.
Right.
Like, for example, the conditions in your stomach. So there are many ways that your body regulates good and bad bacteria in your gut. One of them is by having an acidic stomach. That also coincidentally helps with breaking down food. But adding excess acid of one sort or another won't make a difference to your gut acidity.
That's right. Your body does a pretty good job.
There are ways that your body buffers the acidity in your digestive system, and it also does a pretty good job of regulating which bacteria are good and which bacteria are bad.
And your body does a pretty good job of regulating many things that are essential to its life, like regulating its pH. You hear about a lot of these dietary supplements that help to maintain a healthy pH.
Might be an IdioFacto on that too.
There very well may be.
Our list is getting longer and longer every week. It's ridiculous.
It is. Stop mentioning things.
No, that's good. It means we've got more to talk about. It's fine.
Good. That's right.
So acetic acid is also found in vinegar and most fermented substances, including beer and wine. It's also found in any pickled food items. So you can get it from those if you really think that acetic acid is going to make a difference. But there's no evidence that kombucha can kill any bacteria in the gut or outside it.
Right.
Number 4 checked off the list. So number 5, kombucha may reduce heart disease.
Wow. It's a big claim.
I'll read you the exact quote.
Okay.
Rat studies show that kombucha can greatly improve 2 markers of heart disease. He's talking about 2 types of cholesterol, and he's still talking about rats.
Right.
Neither of these things are relevant to humans.
And also, I don't understand why you couldn't test this on a human. I mean, we know that kombucha can be drunk by humans. There are humans who have heart disease. Normally, rat studies are used to test things that we're not quite sure about, whether or not they will harm or kill a human, but kombucha's fine.
I think part of the problem is that it presents itself over a long period of time. So the studies would have to either be retroactive or be designed to last for a very long time.
Right, okay.
Like a lifetime, for example.
Okay.
Or you could go and look at all the people who have heart disease and see how often they have drunk kombucha and see if there's a higher incidence in the people who haven't drunk kombucha as there is in people who have.
Yeah, that's right.
However, that hasn't been done. It has been done in green tea. He mentions, in fact, that green tea has positive effects on heart disease risk, which may have been true in a paper somewhere, but the systematic review, as we said earlier, found no evidence for this. That was the Cochrane Library one that I talked about before from 2012.
Right, pretty reliable source.
Yeah, so that's number 5 gone. So he's got 3 more to convince me. Number 6, kombucha may help manage type 2 diabetes. So he mentions that in a study, kombucha slowed down the digestion of carbs, therefore reducing blood sugar levels in rats. He mentions another systematic review paper that found that green tea drinkers we'll ignore the fact that he's talking about tea again, had an 18% lower risk of becoming diabetic. I went and looked at that paper that he cited. It was a paper in the Archives of Internal Medicine. And the conclusion of that study, the first line in the conclusion of that study says, owing to the presence of small study bias, our results may represent an overestimate of the true magnitude of the association. The putative protective effects of these beverages warrant further investigation in randomized trials.
Right, so anywhere that you hear warrant further investigation, what the science world sees that as is no effect was seen. Perhaps we could redesign the study if we can be bothered, but we didn't find anything.
The study also mentions these beverages, and by these beverages, what they mean is the beverages that they tested, which were caffeinated coffee, decaffeinated coffee, black and green tea.
Right.
All of them showed the same decrease.
Okay.
And I'm not sure where we got the 18% number from. Seems to just made that one up. So, don't know. So I wouldn't say that's evidence that kombucha
Not really.
will help manage your type 2 diabetes. Anyway, number 7 of 8. Kombucha may help protect against cancer.
Wow, that's dangerous.
In test tube studies, kombucha helped prevent the growth and spread of cancerous cells. There haven't been any studies of kombucha on cancer in people. Test tube studies are not clinical studies.
No.
They have more problems, I would say, than rat studies, even. Lots of things happen in test tubes and in petri dishes that don't happen in the body or even outside the lab. So even if we accept that the test tube studies may have shown some sort of promise, the Cochrane review from earlier was on green tea and it found that there was no difference, despite there being some promise from test tube studies in green tea as well.
Right.
There's no reason to suggest that kombucha is any different to green tea in that respect.
I'm actually not surprised that there haven't been any human studies on the effects of kombucha and cancer. I know that if I had that illness, I probably wouldn't be willing to put my trust in kombucha.
Again, the only way you'd be able to study that is retroactively. You couldn't set up a trial, ethically, you couldn't set up a trial where you treat some people with chemotherapy and some people with kombucha.
Yeah, that's right.
There's no reason to suggest that kombucha is in any way helpful, especially if it's just been done in test tubes. So I don't think that is in any way evidence that kombucha has any effect on cancer.
No, test tube experiments do not translate to in-human experiments.
It's got a long way to go before it can do that.
Yeah.
Reason number 8. Kombucha is healthy when made properly. Is this an evidence-based reason, is my first question. Is that a reason to... there's no solid evidence to say that it's healthy, as I've mentioned in the last 7 reasons. And he even notes that contaminated or over-fermented kombucha can cause serious health problems and even death.
I like that he's offered a disclaimer, though, of the when made properly.
Yeah, well, he suggests that you buy a commercially available kombucha.
Right.
So while these serious health problems and death is unlikely, there are similar risks with homebrew beer, and it wouldn't be a significant barrier to making your own or drinking your own kombucha at home.
There's a similar effect to a homemade curry.
How so?
If you get it wrong, if you don't cook the chicken, you could get salmonella.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Anything that's homemade could potentially be dangerous if you don't do it properly.
Yeah. Well, the reason he mentions that is because the only real scientific study that has been done on kombucha are case studies of when it's gone wrong.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he probably mentions this because it's really the only evidence that there actually exists for anything scientific to do with kombucha is when it goes wrong and a doctor says, hey, this is interesting. All of these people drank kombucha and then had the same symptoms. Maybe I should write a case series on these. So homebrewed kombucha can contain high levels of lactic acid, which causes lactic acidosis, or they can be much higher in alcohol content, like I said earlier, up to 3% than they were intended to. Like I said, again, commercially available kombucha contains less than 0.5% alcohol and is therefore sold as non-alcoholic. You'd have to drink a hell of a lot of it to get any sort of buzz from it.
Okay.
Commercially available kombucha, however, can also contain added sugar and or fruit juice. And that would potentially cancel out any small health benefits you receive anyway, given that the effect is so small.
Yeah, so I have actually tried some of this kombucha that is flavoured as any flavour that you want, I suppose, lemon, lime, watermelon, berry. And it's actually pretty tasty, but to be honest, it just tastes like a soft drink that is that flavour. It's got a slight cidery bitterness to it, I suppose.
And it's probably just as healthy, probably has the same level of sugar. There's no way I could see that you would recommend someone to drink kombucha over soft drink unless they like the taste.
Yeah, exactly right.
That's the only reason. So there's no substantial evidence that consumption of kombucha is in any way beneficial to humans. In fact, all of the research on kombucha is case studies of adverse events. There's significantly more evidence around green tea, and kombucha can be made from green tea and therefore likely contain the same benefits. However, systematic reviews of green tea find little to no significant health benefits from drinking it, provided you have an otherwise varied and healthy diet. So if you like the taste, go for it, but you couldn't convince me to drink it.
No, I'm not sure what else you're eating if you like the taste of kombucha.
Unless it's sweetened and flavoured.
That's right.
Can't really see it being very tasty. I don't like green tea either, so, you know.
I believe what you're saying is if you eat a healthy diet, you're going to be healthy. If you eat absolute crap, chances are your gut bacteria is also going to be unhealthy.
It's funny that if you want to live a healthy lifestyle, then you should live a healthy lifestyle.
Take a mushroom and then wrap it in a fold of human skin and then put it into some muddy water, and that is what kombucha looks like when it's sitting in the bowl in your fridge.
Oh, yeah, some of these scobies, and it even sounds yuck. Scoby. Ugh.
Scoby, yeah.
Yeah.
That's horrible. Let me just drain my SCOBY of its fluid and drink it.
It sounds like a medical procedure. I would not want to be a part of that. That's it for this episode of IdioFacto. Forward all suggestions, hate mail, evidence, arguments, and scobies to idiofacto@gmail.com.
And you can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, ScobyTube, and all other social platforms at IdioFacto. Links are in the show notes.
I was just kidding. We don't actually want your scobies, please. They're disgusting.
Is general relativity. It's actually a tongue twister. You try and say it.
General relativity?
Enunciate it properly, though.
General relativity.
Yeah, it's difficult.
But you don't... Nobody talks like that.
General relativity.
General relativity.